Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Tommy Waldman,
And Riley Mechanic.
and today we'll be discussing the economic impact of Hurricane Harvey on our target city of Houston, Texas. So, to give a brief overview of the topics we'll be covering throughout this presentation today, we'll begin with our initial research questions, which we will aim to answer through the analysis of our gathered data and the methodology we used to calculate our regressions, which lead us to our eventual difference in difference and difference in difference in difference results, which we will analyze towards the end of this presentation.
Our questions were: what was the economic impact of Hurricane Harvey on the residents of Houston, Texas? And did it disproportionately affect people of color?
So, to give a brief background on Hurricane Harvey itself, Hurricane Harvey made landfall in August of 2017. It was a Category 4 hurricane that made landfall over Houston, Texas, and it was recorded as the most powerful storm to ever hit Texas. Ultimately, it leaves behind $125 billion in property damage, around 200,000 damaged properties, and 40,000 people displaced. This paper seeks to analyze the individual level economic impact of the storm in Harris County, Texas.
The data that we collected was from IPMS, which originally got it from the U.S. Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We gathered the 2 years before and 2 years after the hurricane, so 2015 and 2019. The variables we used in this project were income, poverty status, years of education, employment status, gender, race, ethnicity, and age.
And now we'll discuss a bit about how we modified this data to make it fit with our analysis. So our treatment city was Houston. It's located in Harris County, and our initial data set had every county within Texas as well as every state within the U.S. So we filtered the data using the state FIP filter, and we isolate Harris County itself. And then we used the control of Phoenix, Arizona, as it was statistically similar in some regards to our treatment city of Houston. However, it is worth noting that upon running the balance test between these two cities, there were significant statistical inconsistencies, and it fails the balance test.
The dummies that we made from the IPMS data include PovStat, which is a dummy for poverty, which is 1 if it is below the federal poverty line, which is in the data about 100, and 0 if it was above. Non-white takes the value for any observation with a race other than white, 0 for those reported as white. And for Houston, it takes the value of 1 for observations within Harris County and 0 for observations in Maricopa County, where Phoenix is located. Post-hurricane takes the value 1 for the year 2019, 2 years after Harvey, and 0 for 2015, the time before the storm. Gender, we didn't change very much. We just made it so that women take the value of 1 and then men take the value of 0.
Moving on to our method section, we, as seen in this slide, used a difference in difference model. The difference in difference models either identify the change in log wage or the change in poverty status. It's important to note that in the difference in difference models, 1A and 2A, we do not take into account our other covariates. We are simply seeking to examine the interaction terms. However, in our expanded models, we examine the results alongside our covariates. And then on this next slide, you can see our difference in difference in difference models, which are quite similar to our initial models. However, these are expanded to further analyze the effect that the non-white variable had. So as you can see here, this is our most critical interaction term, post-hurricane Houston non-white. Essentially, this term will analyze the impact of individuals within Houston following the hurricane that are non-white compared to non-white individuals following the hurricane in Phoenix.
The results portion.
Because we were only analyzing 2 years, 2015 and 2019, we were unable to create graphs for the first portion of our results section. It's important to note that the data coming from 2019, the year of the hurricane, is presumably inaccurate because the Census Bureau would have been unable to generate consistent results due to the impacts of the hurricane. So instead, we create 2x2 tables to illustrate mean change in log wage and mean change in poverty rate. Our columns are denoted non-white minus white Phoenix and non-white minus white Houston. This represents the differencing we did to identify the gaps in the mean change in log wage in Phoenix and Houston, as well as the gaps between non-whites and whites as it relates to their poverty rates in Phoenix and Houston in the table on the right. So on this slide, we have the first expanded version of our results. These are going to be our difference in difference models. On the left, you have the difference in difference of log wage, and on the right, you have the difference in difference in the impoverishment stat. You can pause the recording here and take a more detailed look at our findings. Due to time constraints, we're really going to be focusing on our interaction terms and our treatment effects that we've identified. So in both these models, the difference in difference models, our interaction term is going to be the Houston post-hurricane. And the table on the left, when you difference everything out, you find that the treatment effect is around a 7% decrease in wages between Houston and Phoenix following the hurricane. If you look at the poverty stats on the right, looking at model 2 on the left, you find very significant decreases in wages, nearly 15% while taking into account the other covariates. Looking at the table on the right, we find a treatment effect in model 1 of an increase in likelihood of poverty in Houston by about 1.6% following the hurricane, and then expanding the model out to take into account our other covariates, you find similar results, around a 2% increase in likelihood of poverty in Houston following the hurricane. Now, these are going to be our difference in difference models. They're very similar to the previously covered models. However, we now have a triple interaction term, non-white Houston post-hurricane, which aims to identify the economic impact of Hurricane Harvey on non-white residents within Houston. We are able to identify a treatment effect of around 11% in model 1 in the log wage table, which indicates non-white residents of Houston following Hurricane Harvey make less than their unaffected non-white counterparts in Phoenix. However, it is important to note that this value is not statistically significant at the 10% level. Model 2, again, is expanded to take into account our other covariates. We find that the magnitude of the interaction term increases by nearly 5%, however, it's not statistically significant. So we can conclude that the lack of statistical significance in the DI-DID interaction terms suggests that non-white people were not disproportionately affected by the hurricane. Everyone in Houston suffered. Moving on to our poverty DI-DID model, we're able to determine through the calculation of our treatment effect that our treatment effect is around 5.5%, indicating non-white residents of Houston following Hurricane Harvey are more likely to be impoverished than their non-white counterparts in the control city of Phoenix. Expanding this model out to take into account our covariates, we're able to determine treatment effect of an increased risk of poverty for non-whites within Houston of around 4%.
To summarize, the estimated treatment effect on wages after Hurricane Harvey, on average, Houston's residents' wages fell by about 7% compared to Phoenix. When controlling for race, age, education, and gender, wages fell by 15%. And regardless of the hurricane, non-white residents of Houston make 14% less than non-white residents of Phoenix, which is just important to take into account when thinking about everything. And for the estimated treatment effect on poverty rates after Hurricane Harvey, Houston residents were 1.6% more likely to be impoverished than those living in Phoenix. And when controlling for race, age, education, and gender, the risk of poverty increased by 2% compared to Phoenix. And then non-white residents of Houston were about 5% more likely to be impoverished than non-white residents in Phoenix.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
We hope that you learned something, and we are excited to hear back from you on Thursday.